Title: The Depth of Stillness. Year: 118,333,333. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The once god slept beneath the mirror lake, suspended in a cradle of silt and forgotten prayers. His name was no longer spoken in temples, only whispered in dreams and lullabies sung by those who didn't know why they sang. Above the water, the echo eater waited. She was not a being of hunger but of balance. Wherever voices rose to divide, she walked among them and swallowed the noise. Her presence calmed revolutions and softened bridges, but it came at a cost. She consumed connection just as much as conflict. One day, the lake stirred. The old god's breath rippled the stillness, and the echo eater knew. Love was trying to surface. Chapter 2. Villages encircled Mirror Lake, each believing the others were enemies. They'd forgotten why. Petty borders, old blood, and the whisper of them that has kept them divided. Then a child vanished beneath the water, and resurfaced hours later, unharmed, but changed. She spoke not in her tongue, but in the words of another village. And when two mothers, one for each land, came to claim her, the echo eater stepped between them. "You both love her," she said. They denied. They accused, but when the child wept, the god stirred again, and the stillness deepened. Chapter 3. Love. The god murmured through the lake, is not loud. It is not possessive. His presence. And in that silence, the villagers heard one another truly for the first time in generations. The echo eater wept as the echo of old hate left her throat. The child was raised by both families. The borders softened. The lake grew clearer, because still waters carry secrets too deep for moving minds. And the deepest secret was this: love binds, not by rope or word, but by the silent, stubborn act of choosing another, again and again, even when it hurts, especially when it heals. Title: The Many Eyes of Morning. Year: 118,205,127.8. Europe. Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Harlequin Oracle was said to wear 1,000 masks, each carved from the dreams of a different village, each whispering secrets only she could hear. Some called her mad, others called her divine, but all feared the same thing. The way she saw, not just truths, but contradictions. She wandered into the foothills of Vernel, where generations feuded over whose bloodlines claimed the oldest right to the sun tower's peak. Neither side had ever heard the other speak directly, so the oracle gathered them, not for battle, but for a play, written by no one, yet true to all. Chapter 2. She assigned them roles reversed from their history. The nobles played the rebels played the ruling class. Everyone wore a masked sheaf from their rival's tale. They protested, then performed, because something inside them wanted to be understood even while pretending. By the end of the performance, no one cheered. They wept. The watcher from the morrow, silent until then, stood and said, "Fear-faced his wisdom burst." The oracle bowed, then burned the stage. "You see now," she said, "wisdom is not knowing. It is seeing through." Chapter 3. The feud did not vanish, but it changed. Negotiations began between shared meals. Children began trading masks. Elders recited both versions of history. And the oracle, she disappeared into the mist, leaving only one mask behind, plain, unfinished, with eyes wide open. No inscription, no prophecy, just presence. Because understanding different perspectives doesn't end conflict, it transforms it. And wisdom begins the moment you see with more than your own eyes. It begins the moment you let another truth sit beside your own and listen. Title: The Collapse of Perfection. Year: 118,076,922.8. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Harlequin Oracle wore a mask with a cracked down its center, not from battle, but from too much seeing. She wandered the city of Thurston, the place known for gleaming marble roads and perfect geometric towers. Its people polished every surface and punished every flaw. Behind closed doors, they wept. Into the city of clean lines came the archivist of regret, summoned for consultation on how to preserve legacy through ideal behavior. He did not smile. He unpacked a bag of broken objects: a child's shattered flute, cracked tea bowl, a torn wedding scroll. The council scoffed. "This is not perfection." "Exactly," he replied. "These are truths." Chapter 2. The oracle stood in the square at dusk, and told stories not of triumphs, but of mistakes. The queen who drowned her people in ambition, the farmer who saved a village by planting the wrong crop, and the people leaned in because they recognized themselves. Later, she found the archivist sitting in the temple of still waters. He held a mirror, scratched and old. "This is the truest record we have," he said. "It reflects without flattery. You are not initiated by comfort." she whispered, but by the sacred collapse of illusion. That night the towers rang, not with bells, but with silence. Chapter 3. The Council abolished the perfection standard. The Academy of Flaw opened, teaching children how to learn through error, not erase it. And in the temple's hall, the archivist etched a single phrase: "Mistake is the mother of motion." The oracle left, her mask now chipped in 2 places, but her voice lingered. In marketplaces, people began to laugh at their stumbles. In homes, regrets were shared over meals. In silence, healing became sacred, because striving for perfection can imprison. But embracing imperfection, that's where progress begins. That's where truth lives. And where we all finally breathe. Title of days. Year 117,948,717.5. Era, Bloodstone Age. Author, Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Ghost General was once a legend of the border wars. Feared for winning battles without shedding blood, his enemies vanished, never slain. Then the crown betrayed him. Branded a conspirator, he fled into the night, stripped of name and title. His armor was buried beneath layers of dust in a crime-ridden quarter of Elver Hollow, where power shifted nightly and justice was a whisper swallowed by greed. But he had not come to fade. He had come to watch, to wait, and to find the one spark that could restore the fire he'd once commanded. Her name was Mara, a thief barely 17, with a talent for vanishing and a scar she never explained. Chapter 2. She tried to steal from him. He caught her. She expected punishment. Instead, he offered a job, not as a thief, but as an apprentice. She laughed, until she realized he wasn't joking. Under his tutelage, she learned not how to fight, but when not to, how to listen, how to see the whole board, not just the next move. Elver Hollow's underlords grew uneasy. One night, cornered by 3 blades and no escape, Mara stepped forward instead of back. "One moment of bravery can rewrite the entire course of your days," he had told her. So she drew a line in the dirt and said, "You want to rule? Then meet me on this side." They didn't. They couldn't, because fear is loud. But conviction is a silence that disarms. Chapter 3. By winter, the hollow had changed. Street patrols formed not by decree, but by pact. Crime dropped. The general's name returned whispered first, then sung. And Mara, she became a myth in her own right. The exile's comfort, they called her. The one who gave voice to the lost and breath to the cornered. Not because she had all the answers, but because she never flinched from the question. Resilience, the ghost general once wrote, is not taught. It is tested, and it begins the moment you stop running and step forward. Title: The Measure of Thread. Year 117,820,512.5. Era, Bloodstone Age. Author, Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The shattered healer lived in the quiet edge of the township of Relon, beside the Loomhouse ruins. Once a famed battlefield medic, now she mended fabric, not flesh, sewing clothes for orphans and robes for those who had lost their titles to time. She had refused every offer to rejoin the war front clinics, not because she couldn't help, but because she had once saved a general at the cost of a village left burning. The threadless spinner visited on the first day of frost. No one saw her enter, but the bells about the loom rattled without wind. She spoke a question as she passed through the healer's door. What is left when only one side wins? Chapter 2. The village faced a crisis of disease that didn't kill, but stole strength. Crops wilted. Elders grew immobile. Children ceased speaking. The governor ordered all aid to focus on key farms to protect the food supply. But the healer walked into the least valuable home first, a blind widow with no family. There she stayed. Why her? Asked the spinner. Because no thread is wasted, said the healer, if it's stitched in kindness. She was warned, criticized, threatened. Still, she mended what she could, not to win, to weave. And slowly something began to spread. Not the illness, but care. Chapter 3. When the time came to choose who would receive the last shipment of supplies, the town met in silence. Then one farmer, previously the loudest for hoarding, stood and said, "The shattered healer never counted worth, only need. Let us do the same." The supplies were shared. The sickness retreated. And the spinner, she left behind a shawl on the healer's doorstep, made from threads the healer had unknowingly sewn into her patient's clothes. Each stitch glowed faintly in moonlight, a record of grace. It's not the battles you fight, it's the ones you avoid that echo longest. Because sometimes healing means choosing others, even when the cost is you. Title: The 10th Gate Opens. Year 117,692,003. 107.2. Era, Bloodstone Age. Author, Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The wandering monk had 9 gates behind him, each a city he had saved, not through might, but through listening. His vow was simple: speak only when silence had failed. So when he arrived in the canyon town of Karth, which had split itself in two over a prophecy none remembered clearly, he said nothing. He simply walked. One half saw him as a threat, the other as salvation. He claimed neither. He visited the broken, sat with the stubborn, then did be ignored, until the children began following him, led by a mute girl with a carved wooden eye, known only as the child of the 10th gate. She was born during a solar eclipse and named in secret. Some believed she was cursed, others chosen. Chapter 2. The monk watched her play along the division stone's giant slabs that marked the border between the warring sides. Where others walked around them, she danced through them. He sat beside her one desk. She offered him a seed, and then signed a question with her hands. Which side is home? He did not answer. Instead, he took the seed and planted it in the stone. That night, both sides gathered to watch him water it. Silly, foolish, pointless, until the stone cracked. By morning, a balloon opened where division had once stood. The child smiled, and the people began to see differently. Chapter 3. The elders from both sides came to speak to the monk, but he still would not answer. Instead, he guided them to the children's gathering, where stories of both sides were shared as riddles and rhymed, until no one could tell who was who. Perspective began to melt certainty, and strength grew from discomfort, because understanding doesn't erase, it expands. The 10th gate was never a place. It was the act of opening, and so the monk left, as always. No shrine, no statue, only a vine growing through stone, and the girl now called teacher by both sides. The road least walked had led her there, and them with her. Title: The Dream in the Teeth of Winter. Year 117,564,102.3. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The echo of creation had once been a spy for the Republic of 9 Teeth. Now, she wanted the frost, hidden lands in exile, her secrets etched into her breath, seen only when she exhaled in the cold. She arrived in the outpost of Brask under a false name, seeking nothing but silence. But silence does not last where lives have laid foundations. Brask was a mining colony. What they mined wasn't ore, it was belief, propaganda scrawled into rock tablets. Children taught to forget their pasts in favor of uniform narratives. The dream in the teeth of winter came to her in the form of a starving child who whispered, "They say my mother never lived, but I remember her humming." That was all it took. Chapter 2. The echo listened. Then she began to speak. Small truths first. The names of stars forgotten by the state. The real name of a river routed to drown a rebel village. Then bigger ones. The fate of the missing. The lies behind patriotic disappearances. The treaties broken, not by outsiders, but by internal convenience. Each truth was traded in secret, until it wasn't. The overseer arrested her. Public trial. Frozen chains. Question hurled before the crowd. Why expose old wounds? And her answer: what you trade for peace becomes the weight peace must carry. Chapter 3. They expected riots. What came instead was a soft rebellion. People stopped reciting the pledge. Miners carved real names into stone. Teachers began with "let me tell you what was" before they told us what is. The overseer fled. The dream in the teeth of winter returned, and the breath of the people, and the songs sung without permission, and in one final echo chiseled into the town's old stone square. Truth is the frost that burns only what was false. She walked alone once more, but lighter, because when truth is told, even in the coldest places, freedom begins. A thaw. Title: The Weight Beneath the Stone. Year 117,435,896.9. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The boundless listener never interrupted, not because she lacked voice, but because she knew the world's screams were often just wounded whispers. In her village of Cradlefen, where floods swallowed fields and fathers vanished in mines, endurance was mistaken for silence. She listened to the river complain and foam. She listened to mother's hush pain into lullabies. She listened to herself, not yet broken, but bending, and when the stone that weeps was uncovered, an artifact said to reflect the soul of any who touched it, everyone expected it to scream. Instead, it whispered her name, and by choice. Chapter 2. Touching the stone was taboo, but tradition had only ever served the unshaken, so she touched it, and it wept, not for her, but as her. Her grief, her fear, her fury, it poured from the cracks, and the village trembled. The elders tried to silence her, but she stood atop the well and said, "Power begins the moment you choose your response instead of your reaction." Then she wept without shame, and others joined her, men who'd never mourned their brothers, children who never admitted fear. Women who had held the world on their backs and called it duty. They all cry together. Chapter 3. The floods came again, but this time no one waited for orders. They moved as one. She didn't command. She listened to the river, to the tremors, to the people, and the village endured. Afterward, they carved a statue not of her, but of a single ear, wrapped in vines, weeping because strength had not come from avoiding pain. It had come from facing it, maiming it, and staying. Because coming of age is not about standing tall. It's about standing open, even as the storm insists you shouldn't, especially then. Title: The Memory That Builds. Year: 117,307,692.1. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the ruined city of Valenvas, knowledge was forbidden. Libraries were ash pits. Questions: form of treason. Yet beneath the wind-scoured bones of the citadel, there dwelled a whispering network of seekers, ones who had not forgotten that once the stars were charted for understanding, not control. The thorn embrace led them. A woman whose every limb bore the scars of interrogations survived, endured, and remembered. Her companion was the echo of a lost realm, a child who could recite any passage heard once. Together, they hunted forgotten truths like wolves pacing the edges of a firelight no one dared to admit still burned. They found a scroll that changed everything beneath the shattered dome of governance. Peace flees the hands that cling to what was. Chapter 2. The regime that ruled Valenvas promised safety and silence, but the thorn embrace stood before the relic binders and read aloud from ancient codes of learning. She named constellations that no longer had names. She taught math to orphans using stones. She shared recipes from memory, recreating not just meals but heritage. And slowly, quietly, the people gathered, at first in ones, and in dozens. They listened not just for knowledge, but for permission to think, to wonder, to remember what was never truly gone. The echo translated every lesson into coded songs children could hum while sweeping streets. Chapter 3. The regime came. They brought fire and chains, but they didn't expect books hidden in crates of grain. Were leaders trained in forgotten strategy? Were a people whose minds had awakened? Resistance didn't roar. It rose. When the smoke cleared, the citadel belonged to the people once more, and in its highest tower, a bell rang again, not to signal rule, but reflection. The thorn embrace vanished afterward, but her legacy stayed inked into every wall. The echo of a lost realm became its first chancellor, and in the rebuilt library, above the entrance, reads a single phrase: knowledge is not peace, but it is where peace begins. As to pursue it is to become unafraid. Title: The Mirror in the Obedient Sky. Year: 117,179,486.6. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The one who fell from the sky twice was not a myth, she was a warning. First, she had plummeted from a failed experiment in atmospheric ascent. The second fall was quieter. Her descent from celebrated visionary to whisper pariah. She had questioned the high loomers, the elite who claimed to weave destiny from atop their floating citadel. You see clouds, they said. We see patterns. And the people believed them, until the sky burned. Now she lived beneath the citadel's shadow, in a village taught never to look up. She looked anyway, and she saw the shimmer flickering like guilt behind stained glass. Chapter 2. Strange symbols began appearing in the crops. The villagers thought them blessings. She thought otherwise. She gathered the signs and traced their origin. A buried relay beneath the schoolhouse transmitting obedience pulses. Messages layered in beauty, sewn into lullabies and lesson plans. She confronted the head scribe. He shrugged. Control is peace. She whispered, and peace without truth is sleepwalking. He called her a heretic. The next morning she vanished, but in her place the disruptor arrived. A masked figure who asked dangerous questions, like, who taught you silence was safety? And, why do your children hum songs they don't understand? Chapter 3. The citadel cracked, not from war, but from doubt. Villagers stopped reciting the sky code. Farmers tilled over the glyphs. Children sang new songs, ones they wrote themselves. Eventually, the high loomers sent emissaries. They found empty squares and mirrors nailed to every gate, etched with a phrase: what you release into the world is what builds your reflection. The one who fell from the sky twice had returned to the clouds, not to rule, to listen, because mystery is not the enemy of truth. Obedience without question is, and the sky remembers every silence, until you give it something honest to echo back. Title: The Silent Storm. Year: 117,051,281.8. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Town of Bear. And sat on a cliff edge, the sea constantly roaring below, its wind shaping the stones into whispers. It was here that the silent storm returned. No one remembered her name, only the flood she caused, the bridge she broke, the child who drowned because she hesitated too long. She'd fled before they could bury the truth with her guilt. Now, years later, she returned with no fanfare, only a satchel full of tools and a scar on her hand that had never healed. She did not beg forgiveness. She asked for work, and the serpent of self, Sabotage, watched from the crowd, coiled in a smile, waiting for her to unravel. Chapter 2. She began by rebuilding the bridge, not because anyone asked, because no one dared to. The town grew restless. Some spat at her. Others whispered, she has no right. But every board she laid, she named a mistake she had made. Every stone, a truth she had ignored. The children came first, curious, then helpful, then the elders, silent but nodding. And when the bridge reopened, she did not walk across first. She stood aside and let the youngest child of the man she had filled carry the first lantern over. Chapter 3. The Serpent of Self. Sabotage finally struck, accusing her in public, naming her past, demanding exile. But the mayor, once her harshest critic, simply said, she has already paid, and kept paying. That is more than most ever do. No applause followed, only stillness. And then the serpent bowed, not in defeat, but in release. It slithered into the crowd and vanished, taking with it the weight that had coiled round so many hearts. The silent storm stayed. She taught. She listened. She named her past not as a chain, but as a foundation for something stronger, because the truths you draw forth shake the constellation of your becoming, and only when you take responsibility do the stars begin to align. Title: The Womb of the Old Ways. Year: 116,923,076.3. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Shadow Twin lived beneath the Temple of First Clay, where all traditions were born and none were allowed to die. Her birth had been an omen, one child with two shadows, one for light, one for lies. The priesthood named her cursed and bound her to silence. They taught the village to honor the rites, never till the ground before prayer, never speak to the unborn, never ask why the walls bled in winter. She obeyed, until she began to dream of the whisper in the womb, a voice that hummed behind stone and memory, asking one question: what still serves you, and what does not? Chapter 2. She stopped kneeling during rites. She asked the midwives why the newborns were branded. She painted over the bloodlines etched on the walls. The elders wept. Tradition is all we have, she replied. Then you buried everything else. They called for exile. She walked herself to the edge of the village, where the earth cracked, and the whisper in the womb rose, not as a scream, but as a song made of every question she was never allowed to ask. It cracked the sky, split the temple, and from its depths, troops long silenced crawled upward. Chapter 3. She returned to the ruins barefoot, with answers etched into her skin, not commands, possibilities. A new planting ritual that didn't starve widows, a naming rite that honored stillborns. A silence held not in fear, but in rest. The village changed not all at once, but as all long wounds do, slowly, truthfully, because long wounds teach slow truths. But the strength that rises from them is forged to last. The shadow twin took no title. She simply listened to the womb of the world, and reminded them, tradition is not a prison. It is a question, one we must keep asking. We hope to remain free. Idle. The Dust Eater's Bargain. Year: 116,794,871.6. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the lower tiers of Fenwood Cradle, where sunlight reached only in memory, lived the Dust Eater. He moved silently through alleyways, cleaning up after the syndicate's misses, not blood, but secrets, false records, coded threats. He didn't speak much, because when he did, people confessed. The language shaper found him there, an order-turned fugitive. She had once rallied a crowd so large the warden's tower shook not from violence, but from tears. Now she came with a single question: what makes loyalty stronger, fear or empathy? The Dust Eater didn't answer. He just handed her a small mirror. See for yourself. Chapter 2. The city above rotted in comfort. The city below rotted in silence. Between them, the syndicate thrived. The language shaper and the Dust Eater began speaking to both layers, first through coded graffiti, then through food deliveries with paper tucked beneath. not demands, not calls to action. Stories of one guard who chose mercy, of a thief who returned stolen medicine, the child who saved a syndicate enforcer from a collapsing bridge. Empathy seeded suspicion of the lies people had believed about each other. Tension cracked, not from force, but from understanding. Chapter 3. When the syndicate discovered their network, they expected resistance. Instead, they found their own members defecting. Not all, just enough to fracture the core. The dustier confronted the boss himself, not with a weapon, but with a list. Names, moments, regrets. You control out there, he said, because you've lost in here. He tapped the man's chest. The boss wept and surrendered. The city didn't erupt in celebration. It exhaled, slowly, as if waking from a fever dream. The language, Japers stayed behind, teaching speech again, not to persuade, but to connect, because control over others, it's often a disguise for inner disarray and empathy. It rebuilds what domination only buries.